Welcome to the CEC Report. It's the 11th of November. I'm Robert Barwick and I'm joined today by CEC leader Craig Isherwood. Welcome, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie.
In this week's CEC Report, we've got one thing to talk about. What does the Trump revolution mean for Australia? So, Craig, there's been some big news this week.
Yes, believe it or not.
Now, all right, so for those who've been living under a rock, the new president-elect of the United States is Donald J. Trump, believe it or not. And this means there are big changes afoot. And what we're going to do today on this week's CEC Report is discuss how this happened, how we think it happened, and we've got some insights into that. Craig and I have just come from a international briefing from an associate in the United States who was able to give us an on-the-ground perspective of what went on there, and we're going to share some of that.
And I think that, Robbie, that's really the key, is because we've been hearing nothing but filtered media in this country for a long, long time. And I think it's really, if you have a look at this media, when you ever looked at the Clinton campaigns, it was always close in camera angles to make this illusion there was a lot of people there. But when it panned out and you saw Donald Trump's campaign events, it was wide open, you saw thousands of people. We also had reports on the ground that you had enormous uprisings in various areas of the United States. You know, people just absolutely, excited about the possibility that there could be a change in American politics. And I want to say, Robbie, back in 1988, when we first ran our first seat at the CEC in Barwick, I saw this. This is when ordinary people became empowered to take charge of what they saw as their only chance to change the government. And that's why we won initially back in 1988 our first seat within the state government back then. Now that's 28 years ago. What you've seen in the United States is actually a mass strike phenomenon. And people say, well, what does that mean, a mass uprising? Well, not really. It's a mass strike because the people of the United States have been so smashed by the Obama policies, which in turn is actually the same policies as the Clinton policies.
I'm going to give some details of that in a minute,
and
so people give people a perspective.
And people basically said, well, there's only one thing we can do, and that's vote. And that's what they did. And then I think even Donald Trump was surprised of the sort of support that he got, because yes, he did tap into that sentiment very, very strongly. But look, it's not in isolation. You know, we've recently had President Duterte in the Philippines, where you've had a complete revolution there of the same type. This is a mass strike where the people have said, we've had enough of this ruling class. And the ruling class and the media in this country got it completely and utterly wrong. And again, go back to Barwick in 1988. I can remember when they actually printed on the Sunday morning edition, meet the new member for Barwick, Warren Truss. And of course it wasn't Warren Truss who had won.
It was Trevor Parrott.
Yeah, CEC. And they literally overshot the mark because they were listening to the establishment's thinking.
And you heard Newsweek did that this week. They had their cover is Madam President, Hillary Clinton, and they got it totally wrong.
And if you step back further, you have a look at what took place with Brexit. The fact that you had a complete transformation there, but also look what happened with inside the Labor Party of Jeremy Corbyn.
And these things are not picked, Craig. The experts, and this is one of the things for the audience to take home, they're not experts anymore.
No.
They are missing it every single time. They say Corbyn's unelectable and he has a huge support. They said Brexit wasn't going to happen. People were going to vote against Brexit, and they voted for Brexit. And they said Donald Trump was not going to win, Hillary was going to win. And Donald Trump had his work cut out for him, but Donald Trump won. And I think even halfway through the day on Wednesday here, and Australian viewers will recognise this, they were being told that 90% chance Hillary would win. And instead it was the opposite.
Completely flip over. And
that's an important point. These experts got no idea.
And that's the interesting thing, because I was talking to someone from a radio station that afternoon. He said, I can't believe it, Trump's won. And I said, I can.
Yeah.
I said, because the CECs, we've been talking about this issue of the mass strike, and it wasn't that you could predict that Trump would win because you don't know what the vote fraud is. You don't know how things can get manipulated. Right,
but we knew he could win.
Well, you knew he could win because you actually won a case
of
beer. I
got my slab of beer.
Right, so that's one of the little rich ironies of this whole process. But what's more important is that What you've seen in the US is a complete repudiation of the war party of Clinton.
Yep.
We've seen a de-escalation to some, not taking it off the table by any means, of this imminent World War III danger that we've continually talked about. It doesn't mean it's off the agenda by any means, but it means there's now time for Donald Trump, who is a complete unknown. I mean, he actually is the apprentice this time.
Well, let's do this. Let's go through some of these in an orderly fashion, right? Because in each case we want to see the impact it's going to have on Australia. But first of all, we need to talk about why did people vote for Trump and why did we know that there was a strong possibility. And of course, the big issue, overarching everything else, is the economy. And I want to highlight that I'm in the middle of drafting a statement for us, Craig, and I've made this. I wrote this sentence in it. The reason the experts couldn't predict this outcome is that Trump was addressing an economic reality that they deny exists. Very important. Mm-hmm. It's two different worlds. They are looking at economic statistics. They look at the stock market, which in the United States is higher, 4,000 points higher than its height before the crash. And they think, self-evidently, that's great. They look at GDP, right? And GDP figures tell them they're having economic growth. And then, let me read you what Barack Obama wrote in the Economist magazine on the 8th of October. So this was he wrote a letter to his successor, assuming it would be Hillary, right? And he wrote it in the Economist. Now this tells you a lot about Obama, because the Economist magazine is the elite mouthpiece for the City of London. And frankly, they have run his economic policy. And he claimed that in the 8 years he was president, this is what he achieved, quote, a more durable, growing economy, 15 million new private sector jobs since early 2010, rising wages, falling poverty, and the beginnings of a reversal in inequality, 20 million more Americans with health insurance, while healthcare costs grow at the slowest rate in 50 years, annual deficits cut by nearly 3/4. Now, if a quarter of that was true, Craig, Donald Trump would not be president of the United States now.
Yep.
Right? Obama was saying something that has no bearing in reality. So what does have a bearing in reality? Well, it turns out, this has just been leaked. The 7th of November, the day before the election, there's a publication called the Daily Caller. And it leaked a Bill Clinton speech from a year ago. And Clinton was addressing a fundraiser, and this was a private speech. And it happened the day after the first Democratic presidential debate. So it was Hillary, Bernie Sanders, and Governor O'Malley, right? And Bill Clinton noted in his speech, he said, what was stark about that debate is what wasn't talked about. And then this is what he said wasn't talked about. He said what wasn't talked about is that, quote, 84% of the American people, after inflation, had not had a raise of 1 cent since the financial crash.
2008.
That's right, and that's a similar. But that holds true for the United Kingdom as well, Craig. And then Clinton went on to say this, quote, middle-aged, non-college educated white Americans' life expectancy is going down and is now lower than Hispanics, even though they, the Hispanics, make less money. And the gap between African Americans and whites is closing. That's the life expectancy gap he's talking about. But unfortunately, not because the death rate among African Americans is dropping, but because the death rate among white Americans is rising. Why? Clinton asked. Because they don't have anything to look forward to when they get up in the morning. End quote. That's the reality of America. We've talked about this when these statistics came out a few months ago now about this dropping life expectancy in the former middle class, the white middle class of the most powerful country on earth. This was, you've got to be sort of plugged into how economics works to realise what an absolute shock this is. This tells you how terrible the United States has become. And of course, the cause was things like suicide, drug overdoses, etc. And that's why Clinton said they don't have anything to look forward to when they get up in the morning. These are people who used to have good, hard but blue-collar jobs where they manufactured stuff and they earned good money and they had a good life, and that's all been gutted, right? And of course, this is why, he said that a year ago, that's why Bernie Sanders did so well. And Bernie Sanders, Craig, did very well. He beat Hillary in those states called the Rust Belt states that used to be the manufacturing heartland of the United States. Hillary, though, made a decision early on in her campaign to not attack Obama and his absolute failings for 8 years, because from the beginning, as WikiLeaks has proved, Wall Street picked his cabinet. It's in the WikiLeaks. Mm-hmm. He was a fraud, this guy. The whole thing is a scam. The 8 years of Obama have been an absolute scam. And unfortunately, you have this thing we were talking about before called identity politics, where you vote based on your identity. And he was able to because of the historical fact that he was the first black president, a lot of black people stayed in his camp, right, when he did no good economically for anybody.
So what you're saying about identity politics, Robbie, is that because I'm a middle-aged white male, I vote like a middle-aged white male, and therefore I can't choose any other politics except
you can't see past that. You don't look at policy, you look at identity.
Yeah, but see, this is where the failure is of all the pollsters, of all the media, and everything, is because they've pigeonholed people into this identity politics.
They've blinded themselves.
Themselves, and then they wake up. Oh, we got it so wrong. Well, of course you did, because you can't see past your own prejudices, and that's where the problems are coming in. And that's where the political problems are coming in. These people like Obama have the media on their side, and these lies get trumpeted through the population. But what's not picked up is the revolt in the population.
That's right. And unfortunately, because it's now been established, people were lying to the pollsters. They weren't saying how they're really going to vote. Craig, we need to take a break. We'll continue this straight afterwards. Welcome back to the CEC Report, where we're discussing what does the Trump revolution mean for Australia. And before the break, we were talking about how the actual state of the American economy, which just made millions of people vote in droves for someone who promised something different. He's got the proofs in the pudding, but he actually promised something different. We're going to talk about this segment, Craig, now. We're going to talk about the two things that any politician can make promises. Trump said things about immigration and that, which was different than other people said, but only different because it was more extreme, right? He was just saying what they're doing anyway. If you're shocked about what Trump said about Mexicans, go Google what Obama is doing to Mexicans. He has rounded up more Mexicans and deported them than any other president before him.
What Australia's doing to our own
refugees. Exactly.
We've
got no moral authority. And we disagree with Trump on this. But you can't single him out for that as if he's the worst in the world, right? There's two things that did set him apart from everybody else, Craig, because even his supporters, who among the professional politicians, would say, I don't really agree with him on that. And the two things are trade and war. So let's talk about trade first. Donald Trump said he broke a consensus that has existed for roughly 30, 40 years now, right? Free trade is good. And the consensus is built on a lie. Free trade made America great. You will hear Australian politicians say that. Well, it's all garbage. But first of all, we'll talk about what Trump said. Trump said, he pointed out NAFTA, which Bill Clinton brought into being.
That's a North American Free Trade Agreement.
North American Free Trade Agreement. Canada, Mexico, the United States. Mm-hmm. He said NAFTA's been a disaster, and then in general, free trade's been a disaster. Now think about why though. Because when people are free trade, first of all, the name sounds nice, free trade, right? It sounds wonderful. You're supposed to think, oh well, we have a free trade agreement, we make stuff that we're good at, we'll sell to more customers. They make stuff that they're good at, they can sell to us. Wonderful. Is that how it worked? No. The multinationals in Wall Street outsourced. They shut down their manufacturing in America, moved it to those places
because it's cheaper.
Because it's cheap labour, and sent it back to be bought by their now unemployed former workforce, right? And those people, through a few financial tricks and stuff, they were able to get easy credit for a while, etc., and buy this stuff on debt. But at a certain point, it reached a breaking point, and that's the period we've been in since 2008.
And right? It doesn't support, say, Mexico. We used to call it
Maquiladoras.
Free trade below the border, it doesn't help the Mexican population because they're trying to use slave labour to build goods that are sold for higher prices back in the US, and consequently you end up with a lot of economic refugees coming across the border
Exactly.
that Mr. Trump wants to build a wall for.
If free trade was good for Mexico, why are these refugees
Why
coming
were they
there?
leaving?
Craig, it's worth addressing a myth at this point because some people might say, yeah, but look what it's done for China. That's a myth. There's two things. One is China has a unique political system, and what China does politically with its single party, Communist Party, etc., although it's happy to engage in capitalist economics, they make sure that China benefits from the deals it's in, right? It's not left up to some mystery magic market. Second thing is China's period of manufacturing also coincided with the biggest period of investment, public investment in history. China's prosperity has risen from that public investment. All these other countries that are the other side, the cheap labour side of free trade agreement, don't have those circumstances, and they've not benefited one iota, and Mexico is the case. So Mexico didn't benefit, and America didn't benefit, and Trump's called that and said this is rubbish. But of course, so much of America's political system is corruptly indebted to the financial interest that did benefit, did make bigger profits out of this, right, off the misery of people, that both Democrats and Republicans have been tied into it. And Trump said, I'm going to pull the rug out from under that. And these people voted for him accordingly. We don't have time to go through it now, Craig, but one thing it's ironic about Trump saying this, because here's Trump, the most crazy, loose cannon, undignified, crude, lewd American president in history, that's what they'll paint him as. On this issue of free trade, he's actually in the same camp as probably the single greatest, most honoured, most dignified American president in history, one Abraham Lincoln, who his whole career was based on saying free trade is garbage. And they had all these economic studies, and America did not become a strong economy on free trade. It became a strong economy on protectionism, as did Australia, as did most industrial economies. Let's take another break, and then afterwards we're going to talk about war. Welcome back to the CEC Report, where we're discussing what does the Trump revolution mean for Australia. Craig, we're going to talk about war, but the other thing that Trump did, and this relates to last week. Now, the CEC Alert Service, this week's edition, the lead was being written just as the votes were being counted, right? But the headline was, so we didn't know who was going to win, but we said, new US president can't hide from Glass-Steagall. And what we point out in there is what we said on last week's show. Trump said he's for Glass-Steagall, right? And when they took opinion polls in these former hardcore Democratic states that he won, which made him president, 70% of them wanted Glass-Steagall. And now Elizabeth Warren, she's the great champion. What's she said? Well,
basically, she was totally anti-Trump for all of the reasons that the misogyny and the vulgarness and so forth. Pro Clinton. When she found out that Trump had won, she says, I'm willing to put aside all my differences to work with you on this. And that's a huge deal, because Trump did come out on the 26th of October at a campaign speech event and said that he wants to introduce a 21st century Glass-Steagall in order to be able to provide the credit for ordinary working class people to develop themselves, to grow and so forth. And that's huge. Now,
it is huge.
We actually as an organisation have to continue a mobilisation to make this the issue for the Trump presidency going forward.
Well, we are the voice of Glass-Steagall in Australia, but we're part of an international network that has made this the central issue all around the world. And now we've got a president who says he's for it, it's got to stick. And Wall Street's on notice.
Well, so this is the thing, Robbie. The Glass-Steagall, what does it do? It says, okay, we need a decent banking system, a good, strong commercial banking system where depositors' deposits are protected and completely separated out from the investment banking, the merchant bankers, and all that parasitical, debt-driven speculation that has ruined the economy and caused such great hardship. That's going to be, in effect, banned from any association with a government-supported and guaranteed banking system, which is how it should be. That's what Glass-Steagall will do.
All right, and now, Craig, in the time we've got left, here's the other issue that separated Trump from the crowd. War. He said from the beginning, consistently, all the way through to the end, that he thinks America should be working with Russia on issues like ISIS. And he would say, and there's so much vested interest in America between the government and the military arms companies, right, that want war. Frankly, they've been pushing it for ages. And he would say, what's wrong with getting on with Russia, right?
Well,
so now he's elected. What does it mean?
Well, I mean, saw in his acceptance speech, or when the very first speech he had when he became the president-elect, he pointed to General Michael Flynn. Now, we know that General Michael Flynn has made very good relationships with the Russians. He's a guy that actually prevented for many, many years under the Obama administration the sorts of wars against Libya and so forth, that the bombing of Libya and tried to rein in, not so much Libya, but actually Syria.
And he warned Obama that his policy in Syria was leading to the rise of ISIS.
Exactly, and he had that degree of influence, but of course, as you would expect,
he was ignored
by Clinton and Obama. He was completely sidelined, he was dumped, and he was put out of the question. However, he's now working with Donald Trump, and maybe he'll take a position in the cabinet underneath Donald Trump. And that's the sort of turn you've seen. Clinton, the warmonger, has been completely and utterly derailed. That means that all the apparatuses that are associated with her and the war are scrambling to figure out how they can continue on their agenda,
and that
which
includes,
is very, very difficult.
And Craig, you'd have to include in that the Australian government, because what they've said, first of all, they had to, do this glum face. We're very happy, President Trump, because they are, suckholes. Sorry. Anyway, but they're going to be a bit manipulative, because they have said repeatedly, and the public will see this watching the news, we need to tell America, we need to tell Trump that we need him here. Right? In other words, if Trump thinks we need to give Trump the impression that only he can save us from China, right? Well, that's the kind of desperation from people that are still representing a militaristic point of view that's going to send us to war.
But if Trump develops a close working relationship with China and with Russia, that means the entire Obama pivot idea goes down the toilet, because China is not going to be seen as an enemy. Right, and this sort of collaboration is exactly the background of what the BRICS countries represent. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, where you're looking at mutual economic collaboration for the enforcement or the promotion of national sovereignty and mutual self-interest. Mutual self-interest, which is the same thing as sharing things.
Cooperate on economic development, both sides can win. All right, so now there's no promises on that last thing. The proof's in the pudding, but hopefully this means there's a distinct change.
This is the revolution that we talked about, Robbie, all these elements, and in a revolution you can never tell what's going to happen from day to day.
In the time we've got left, let's make a public service announcement. Channel 31, Channel 44, as I said last week, just to remind you, those channels that you may be watching the show on go off the air at midnight on December 31st. From that time on, you can only watch the CEC Report on Channel 31 or Channel 44's internet platform, but you can also watch it on the CEC's website and on the CEC's YouTube channel. And the best way to continue watching the show is go to our YouTube channel and click subscribe, and you will get notifications every time it's posted, and you can watch the CEC report that way. And also, if you want information that we've been talking about, it's always available in our weekly publication, the Australian Alert Service. Call in on the 1-800 number, toll-free number, in order a free copy, and you will send you one. But join us as well. That's it for this week's CEC Report. Craig, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Robbie.
Thanks for tuning in.